This week we had Adobe. It was an interesting earnings. I'll kind of take this one. Company, reported record revenue, records across their different segments. Their experience business. So they got the Creative Cloud, the Document Cloud, and the Experience Cloud. The revenue was up about 10%. I saw somewhere and they said it surged. I'm not sure when you're a cloud company, 9% growth is surging. But it was a strong number, strong growth. And remember, we're kind of in this first wave of earnings since the market sort of corrected itself. So now we're kind of starting to look at numbers and growth against a more realistic economy, because for a long time we just had this fire economy. We've seen markets pull back. Now, one of the interesting things is kind of where is the growth coming from? Well, like I said, you're getting about, oh, by the way, with inflation, Pat, you know what, 9%, it's something like an adjusted 17% is what it actually equates to. I'm not exactly sure, but that's how they documented it in their breakdown. Some of the faster growth came in areas like Experience Cloud that saw in the 20s of percentage. Digital Experience, I think it was like 22% adjusted. And then also Document Cloud saw its recurring revenue go up about 26%. So some pretty strong numbers there. But one of the things that was really interesting was this is one of the first companies that reported, Pat, with Russia in play. So if you recall, Adobe basically is pulling out all business of Russia, and it wrote off $75 million in recurring revenue. Now, that was kind of interesting too, because 75 million doesn't sound like that big of a number. So all of Russia accounted for about 75 million. And there was another 12 million in ARR coming out of Ukraine. The company wrote down all of it out of their future guidance. But to their credit, to how they see the market and how their business performing this year, did not change their overall guidance. So even though they took close to 100 million in recurring revenue out of the business in its expectation and their forecast for the rest of the year, the company actually left their guidance intact. Here's the long and short of it, Pat. I think it's in line. I think, their growth overall a little bit lower than like a Salesforce, but I think that's kind of where the company is in its maturity cycle. I think the CDP business is hot. I do think the metaverse is a big opportunity. The company, in terms of creators, when you're thinking about like creating augmented reality experiences on the internet where you're designing your shoe with Nike, that's Adobe. Adobe's the one creating that kind of experience. I think as we take that to the next level, got the AR, VR, XR editions. You've got these metaverse worlds, and you're minting brand items. When you get your Louboutins or what are those fancy shoes you wear? Balenciaga? I don't know. When you're doing that,
I can't afford those. Those are my kids,
and I'm sure they can. But when we enter these next virtual worlds and you see these brand metaverse created experiences, you can be pretty certain Adobe is going to be playing a big part in that. So I see the metaverse and I see the CDPs as the big opportunities there, Pat. The Russia data was really interesting to me. And like I said, the growth was okay. It was solid, but it's really hard to ever kick a company when they're delivering record revenue. So it was a pretty good quarter for Adobe.
Yeah, so I think it's important to put Adobe in perspective. They're a legacy company who wants to break out, and that was similar to Microsoft, I would say 7 years ago. They haven't had their Microsoft moment yet to get to, let's say, a revenue of, overall revenue of 25%. Their SaaS businesses seem very in line with, 20 something, maybe 30 something would be nicer. But it's a classic blend of new businesses and old businesses. Like a trooper, I give my Adobe PDF license. I pay it every month, right? And I think that there's a lot of those folks who are doing that. Their overall numbers are kind of uninspiring, but like I said, very close to what you have with a blended piece, and they just needed to get more of the new business. I'm actually surprised. What did you call the future modern work or something at 25%? Something like that. Yeah. Experience really seems like it should be super high growth on a percentage basis because the revenue is probably low. Anyways, a very, very interesting company. I know them mostly for the PDF and also for their video and photography tools.
And just as a note, because we haven't done Adobe as many times, just a quick boomerang here is they sort of have their overall growth numbers in a different category in experience and media, and then they couple that with what they kind of have their subscription revenues. And so the subscription revenues are growing a little faster, kind of on the same pace as that Salesforce, 15 to 20% in their core businesses. But at the same time, I think everybody's kind of like, is that enough? Is that enough when you're in these key categories?
Yeah.
But the difference between some of those lower growth companies that you and I kind of just try to figure out how people will get excited about, remember, it is recurring revenue. So recurring revenue is hot. It's always going to be hot. And, of course, it's great to grow at 100%, but, 10% compound means you're going to double every 5 years. So that's not so bad when you're in the billions of dollars of revenue.
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of like the HPE GreenLake ARR number.
Exactly. It's exactly right. And so, or even when we talk about AWS and Azure, we always talk about how they're growing 40s and 50s. And what I'm saying is, you got to remember the compounding aspect of that is pretty darn impressive. That's why AWS is doing 16 billion a quarter now. So you can see how fast that can snowball.
Yeah, that's where I think it's fair to compare them to a pure, a SaaS play or a combined SaaS play. And let's face it, the Azure number is lifted a lot by PaaS, and also the fact that they put their own workloads on Azure. Right, like Office. So
that doesn't hurt.